The twin engines of Flight 447 hummed their familiar rhythm as Marcus Chun tightened the final bolt on the cargo door mechanism. 30,000 feet below, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, but his thoughts were anchored to a small apartment where his 80-year-old daughter Lily would be finishing her math homework. The maintenance work paid barely enough, but it kept him close to home, close to her. 3 rows behind first class, Victoria Sterling barely glanced up from her tablet as turbulence jolted her champagne glass. The merger documents demanded her attention more than the nervous chatter of economy passengers. She had built Sterling Technologies from nothing, and tomorrow's board meeting in Tokyo would cement her position as the youngest female CEO in the industry's history. The first violent shake sent Marcus's wrench clattering across the cargo hold floor. His trained instincts kicked in immediately, recognizing the sound of failing hydraulics. This wasn't ordinary turbulence. In the cabin above, Victoria's tablet slipped from her manicured fingers as the plane lurched sideways. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, steady but urgent. Emergency landing procedures. Life jackets. Brace positions. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, securing loose equipment while calculating survival scenarios his mind had been trained never to forget. Victoria gripped her armrest, her business empire suddenly feeling very far away as the ocean rushed up to meet them. Elena's carefully constructed walls finally crumbled under the weight of Colonel Hayes' direct question. She straightened slowly, her posture shifting from that of a maintenance worker to something far more formidable. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to the experienced officers watching. Each mark represents a confirmed kill, ma'am, Elena said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made several soldiers step back involuntarily. 4 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq. 67 confirmed eliminations of high-value targets. The crowd stood in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Kane's face had gone pale, his earlier bravado evaporating like mist in the morning sun. He was staring at a woman whose combat record dwarfed his own training exercises. Colonel Hayes nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. Staff Sergeant Elena Voss, call sign Ghostwalker. I should have recognized the name. You're the sniper who eliminated the insurgent cell leaders in Helmand Province. Elena's jaw tightened at the memory. Among other operations, yes, ma'am. I requested transfer to maintenance duties after my last deployment. The work helps me find peace. The revelation rippled through the assembled soldiers like a shockwave. They were looking at a living legend, someone whose exploits had become whispered stories in military circles. Kane, who had spent the morning mocking her competence, now faced the reality that he was standing before one of the most accomplished marksmen in the entire armed forces. Hayes handed the rifle back to Elena with ceremony befitting its significance. This weapon has seen more combat than most soldiers ever will, she said respectfully. The range fell into cathedral silence as Elena approached the firing line with her rifle. Kane stood frozen, his earlier challenges now seeming like the foolish words of a child who had unknowingly taunted a master. The target downrange, at 800 meters, suddenly seemed inadequate for what everyone sensed was about to unfold. Colonel Hayes called for a fresh target to be placed at the maximum range limit, 1,200 meters. Even the range safety officers gathered to witness what promised to be an extraordinary demonstration. Elena settled into her prone position with fluid grace, her body finding its natural alignment as muscle memory from countless missions took control. The rifle became an extension of her being, every component perfectly zeroed and calibrated through years of meticulous care. Her breathing slowed to a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the very heartbeat of the earth beneath her. The scope's crosshairs found their mark with supernatural precision. The rifle's report cracked across the range like thunder, the sound echoing off distant hills. Through spotting scopes, the observers watched the bullet's impact strike dead center of the target's bullseye. A perfect shot at a distance that challenged even the most skilled marksman. Elena rose gracefully, her demonstration complete without fanfare or celebration. Kane approached slowly, his face showing genuine respect and perhaps a touch of shame for his earlier behavior. "I owe you an apology, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. The entire battalion erupted in spontaneous applause, their respect earned through witnessed excellence rather than proclaimed authority. Elena nodded graciously, then returned to her maintenance station, ready to continue serving in whatever capacity brought her peace. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength. The spring Marcus discovered bubbled clear and cold from a limestone outcrop, hidden behind a curtain of vines that most people would never have thought to investigate. Victoria followed him through the jungle, her designer heels long abandoned for bare feet that were learning to navigate roots and rocks. "How did you know it would be here?" she asked, cupping the fresh water in her hands. "Higher ground, limestone deposits, vegetation patterns," Marcus explained, filling their makeshift containers with practiced efficiency. He didn't mention the reconnaissance training that taught him to read terrain like a book, or how many times he had led patrols to similar water sources in hostile territory. Victoria noticed how he moved through the jungle, each step deliberate and silent. The maintenance worker facade was slipping, revealing glimpses of something more substantial underneath. When he knelt to examine animal tracks in the mud, his posture reminded her of a predator studying prey. "You have a daughter, don't you?" she said suddenly, remembering the photo that had fallen from his pocket during the crash. Marcus's hands stilled on the water bottle. "Lily, she's 8. The tenderness in his voice caught Victoria off guard. "Is that why you took a maintenance job? To be close to home?" Marcus stood slowly, his expression guarded. Sometimes the best job isn't the highest paying one. Sometimes it's the one that lets you be where you need to be. The wild boar emerged from the underbrush without warning, its tusks gleaming and eyes fixed on Victoria as she gathered berries. Her scream pierced the jungle air, freezing her in place as 300 pounds of muscle and fury prepared to charge. Marcus moved like lightning, his body responding with reflexes that belonged to battlefields, not maintenance shops. He placed himself between Victoria and the animal in one fluid motion, his stance low and balanced, hands positioned with the precision of someone trained to kill or be killed. "Easy," he murmured, not to Victoria, but to the beast itself. His voice carried an authority that made the boar hesitate, ears twitching as it recognized a more dangerous predator. When the animal finally retreated into the brush, Victoria remained frozen, her corporate confidence shattered by how quickly death had found her. But more unsettling was watching Marcus transform from mild-mannered maintenance worker into something far more lethal and controlled. "You didn't learn that on YouTube," she whispered. Marcus helped her to her feet, his touch gentle, but his eyes still scanning the jungle for threats. "Just instinct," he said, but they both knew it was a lie. That night, as they sat by the fire, Victoria couldn't stop thinking about the way he had moved, the way he had spoken to the boar like he understood violence on an intimate level. Whatever Marcus Chun used to be, it wasn't ordinary. The fire crackled between them as night settled over the island, painting their faces in warm orange light. Victoria hugged her knees to her chest, her usual armor of confidence replaced by something more vulnerable. "I built my company from nothing," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "Worked 18-hour days, missed every birthday, every holiday. I told myself it was worth it because I was creating something lasting. But sitting here, I realize I don't have a single person who would miss me if I never came home." Marcus poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the darkness. He thought of Lily's laugh echoing through their small apartment, of bedtime stories and scraped knees, of all the moments that made life worth living. "She draws me pictures," he said finally. "Lily, stick figures of us holding hands, going to the park. She tapes them to the refrigerator like they're masterpieces. When she lost her first tooth, she insisted we write a letter to the tooth fairy together. I have a box full of her drawings, her letters, her report cards. That's my empire. Victoria watched him speak about his daughter, seeing a tenderness that transformed his weathered features. Success looked different through his eyes, measured not in stock prices or board meetings, but in a child's smile and the privilege of being present for life's small miracles. The signal fire had burned for 3 days, its smoke column rising straight into the cloudless sky like a prayer. Marcus and Victoria took turns feeding it, watching the horizon for any sign of rescue planes or ships. When the cargo vessel finally appeared, their hearts soared with hope. But the ship passed without slowing, its crew either blind to their desperate signals or simply indifferent to the smoke that meant everything to the survivors on the beach. Victoria collapsed to her knees in the sand, watching their salvation disappear beyond the horizon. 3 weeks of rationed food, sleepless nights, and growing desperation crashed over her like a wave. The CEO, who had never admitted defeat in any boardroom, found herself sobbing into her hands. Marcus knelt beside her, his presence steady and calm. "They'll find us," he said with quiet conviction. "How can you be so sure?" Victoria's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. "Because I have something to get back to," Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on the empty ocean. "And now I have 2 people counting on me to make it home." In that moment, Victoria realized the roles had completely reversed. The maintenance worker she had dismissed as ordinary had become their anchor of hope, while she, the woman who commanded boardrooms, felt utterly powerless against the vast indifference of the sea. Victoria watched Marcus fashion a fishing spear from bamboo and sharpened metal, his hands working with the kind of precision that spoke of extensive training. The tool he created was more sophisticated than anything she had seen in survival documentaries, complete with barbs and a weighted balance that suggested military craftsmanship. "You know," she said carefully, settling beside him on the beach, "I've been thinking about what you said, about having something to get back to." Marcus tested the spear's weight, his expression guarded. "Most maintenance workers don't know field medicine, or how to read weather patterns, or build shelters that could withstand hurricanes," Victoria continued. "Most maintenance workers don't move like you moved with that boar." Marcus continued working, but she could see his jaw tighten. "I've spent my career reading people, Marcus. It's how I built my company. And everything about you says you're not who you're pretending to be." He finally looked up, meeting her gaze with eyes that held depth she was only beginning to understand. Sometimes people become exactly who they need to be for the people they love. The deflection was smooth, but Victoria wasn't fooled. She had seen enough in the past weeks to know that Marcus Chun carried secrets that ran much deeper than maintenance schedules and airport terminals. The question was whether he would ever trust her enough to share them. Victoria's scream pierced the dawn air as she collapsed near the water's edge, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle from the fall down the rocky slope. The other survivors gathered around helplessly, but Marcus was already moving with purpose, his hands gentle but sure as he examined the injury. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone step back. "It's a compound fracture. We need to stabilize it immediately, or she could lose the leg." His fingers probed the wound with clinical precision, and Victoria watched through her pain as he transformed once again. This wasn't basic first aid learned from a manual. This was battlefield medicine, practiced and confident. Marcus tore strips from his shirt, fashioning a splint from driftwood with movements that spoke of countless similar procedures performed under pressure. When he started in 4-line, using supplies salvaged from the plane's medical kit, Victoria's eyes widened despite her agony. "Where did you learn to do that?" She gasped as he administered pain medication with the skill of a combat medic. Marcus met her gaze as he secured the makeshift stretcher he had constructed. "You ask a lot of questions for someone who should be focusing on staying conscious." But Victoria had seen enough. The man treating her wasn't a maintenance worker who had watched YouTube videos. He was someone who had saved lives before, someone trained for exactly these situations. For 2 days, Marcus monitored Victoria's fever and changed her bandages with the methodical care of someone who had tended to wounded soldiers in far more dangerous places. As her pain subsided and clarity returned, her questions became more direct and impossible to deflect. "You were military, weren't you?" she said as he checked her pulse, his fingers finding the precise pressure point without hesitation. Marcus hesitated, his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack under her persistent gaze. "Not just military," Victoria pressed on. "Special forces. Navy SEALs, maybe. That's why you know field medicine, survival techniques, why you move like a predator when threatened." He sat back on his heels, staring out at the ocean that had become their prison. For the first time since the crash, his composure wavered. "My wife Sarah was a nurse," he said quietly. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I left the teams to take care of Lily, to be the parent she needed. The maintenance job at the airport was the only work I could find that kept me home every night." Victoria felt pieces clicking into place. A decorated Navy SEAL reduced to fixing cargo doors and cleaning terminals, all for love of his daughter. "You gave up everything," she whispered. Marcus finally met her eyes, and she saw the depth of sacrifice there. "I gained everything that mattered. Lily needed her father, not a hero who was never home." Victoria struggled to sit up despite her injury, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face as the weight of his revelation settled between them. The maintenance uniform, the humble demeanor, the quiet acceptance of her initial dismissal, it all made terrible sense now. "How many missions?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stared at his calloused hands that had once handled classified operations across 3 continents. "Enough to know that the most important mission is the one happening at home." But Victoria wasn't finished. The question that had been building inside her for days finally broke free, cutting through his defenses like a blade. "What was the hardest part?" she asked, her voice heavy with understanding. "Giving up who you were, or becoming invisible to the world that once celebrated you?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had spent 2 years convincing himself that the sacrifice was simple, that love made every loss worthwhile. But Victoria had found the wound he had been hiding even from himself. "Watching Lily's teacher treat me like I was just another deadbeat dad at the school conference," he admitted, his voice breaking. "Seeing the pity in people's eyes when they learned I cleaned toilets for a living. Knowing that the same hands that had saved lives and served their country were now considered worthless by a world that measures worth in paychecks and titles." Victoria felt her heart shatter for this man who had given up everything for love. The rescue helicopter's rotors thundered overhead as Marcus carried Victoria to the makeshift landing zone, her legs still immobilized but healing. For weeks on the island had changed them both in ways that couldn't be measured in sunburned skin or weight loss. As the medics loaded Victoria onto a stretcher, she grabbed Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "I want to offer you something," she said, her voice urgent over the helicopter noise. "Head of security for Sterling Technologies. Full benefits, salary that matches your real worth, and a schedule that gets you home to Lily every night." Marcus started to shake his head, the old habits of self-denial rising automatically. "This isn't charity," Victoria continued, gripping his hand tighter. "You saved all of us out here. You saved me in more ways than one. I need someone I can trust completely, and I've never met anyone more qualified than you." The helicopter lifted off, carrying them toward civilization, toward Lily, toward a future that felt suddenly full of possibilities Marcus had stopped allowing himself to imagine. If this survival story and unexpected connection touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or if you've ever discovered hidden depths in someone you initially underestimated. 3 months later, Marcus Chin walked through the glass doors of Sterling Technologies wearing a suit that fit his new role perfectly, knowing that in 6 hours he would be home to help Lily with her homework, finally visible again to a world that now recognized his true worth.